Hello, this is Justine Mara Andersen, and welcome to part 2 of In Defense of Eros and Fantasy. We were talking about duality and so on and so forth, inability to hold multiple ideas in our heads, and now we're going to talk a little bit about social double standards, because we also have a problem with an inability to allow men to have their fantasies, without judging or assuming that their fantasies are a reflection of their real-life political or social views, without accepting that fantasies need not be nice, politically correct, or socially acceptable, an inability to give our demons a place to play, and a lack of courage when it comes to exploring our inner demons and the dark shores of the subconscious. However strong our convictions, ours is not to judge, ours is to understand. Judgment is easy. Understanding takes real courage. This kind of brings me around to the myth of Sticky Hair. Sticky Hair was this demon that was raping and pillaging and doing all the horrible things that, rampaging monsters do in a kingdom. And the harder they fought Sticky Hair to destroy Sticky Hair, the more powerful Sticky Hair the demon became. The solution ultimately they found was to give Sticky Hair his own corner of the forest, his own corner of the kingdom. And in doing so, he left everyone else alone. What this myth is basically telling you is that you need a place for your demons to safely play. And that's the purpose of erotic art. That's the purpose of Frank Frazetta paintings, perhaps. That's the purpose of exploitation cinema. It's not to be offensive. It's not to put down women. It's to give our demons a place to play. So let's talk about the whole question of Frank Frazetta. We might see an image like this and immediately knee-jerk and go, oh, he's a misogynist painter, blah, 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 without maybe realizing that, perhaps this is just one aspect of Frank Frazetta, or that perhaps this was commissioned. So here's a feminine power image. Clearly we have this woman in complete power over this enormous male beast, correct? Oh, but she's sexualized. Look at her butt. Well, look at the butts of the orcs. Frank Frazetta wasn't just sexualizing women's bottoms. Frank Frazetta loved bottoms. He loved the mass. He loved the form. He loved the musculature, male or female. So let's go to another female power image. The woman taming the tigers. It's really quite terrific. Oh, but she's half naked, therefore sexualized. You mean like this male image as well? So when we really look at Frank Frazetta in a complete way, rather than just knee-jerking, we begin to see that there's a pattern, and that the power dynamic is not always man on top, woman on bottom, or weak woman, or half-naked woman and fully dressed man. In fact, that's rarely ever the case. Frank Frazetta's work is very honest. That I'll give him. It does tend to have, a very male fantasy bent to it. But, let's be fair to what we're really looking at. Let's really look at this like we just have and see what's really there. And you know what? It turns out pretty equal, doesn't it? Okay, so here was my dilemma when I discovered exploitation films when I was young. So how can anything so wrong be so right? And, wasn't I a good Christian? Well, at the time. Now I'm a practicing Hindu. But anyway, aren't I a liberal and a love child? How can I enjoy these horrible, wicked movies? Why exploitation? Well, for one thing, because pornography is boring, and, if you have a sexual appetite to enjoy the imagination in a sexual, erotic, libidinal way, pornography does not do that. Sexploitation does. Exploitation does. And it's deceptively, obviously, and subversively artful. Wonderful movie, this one, Immoral Tales by Valerian Borowczyk. So here we go. Pornography is nothing more than the portrayal of genitals involved in sexual activity. Eroticism is the portrayal of characters involved in sexual activity. And this is why I journey deeper into sexploitation. To really get it, you can read this book by Pete Toombs. It was this book that really taught me that exploitation films, sexploitation films, were no longer a guilty pleasure, but were actually art in a really rather exalted way as far as I'm concerned. They were daring, they were bold, they said all the things I needed to hear. And furthermore, exploitation films frequently were sexist against men. Men were displayed quite frequently as one-dimensional characters, torturers, tormentors, total just pigs, and the women were trying to get out from under the dominance of the men. So you're really rooting for the women, and it's really about the women liberating themselves from the men. At least that's what many of the exploitation films turn out to be about, when you really look at them, is women rising above and men remaining stuck in their lousy wallow. So I discovered, many years ago, and, through the book Immoral Tales by Pete Toombs, artists like my friend Jean Rollin, the great French film director, whose images were just audacious, this being from his film Fascination. This is a poster from one of Jean Rollin's films. He's been making movies since 67, 68. And, those of us who were into this for comics, this was a French comic artist that did this amazing poster. When I asked Sean why he made films, when they made no money, were treated with disrespect and laughed at, he said, "Because if I don't write or make films, I die." It was his heart. All this came from his heart. It was not because sex sells. It was because Rollin was fearless. The assumption that artists who work in eroticism are selling out is simply ignorant, self-indulgent wish fulfillment on the part of people with certain political ideologies. It's very dangerous to assume an artist's motives, to assume they are low, base, financial, or simplistic. Let's take an artist like Jess Franco, for example, who chose to abandon the financial rewards of mainstream film, having assisted Orson Welles, to follow his muse right into the gutter. Hell yeah, Uncle Jess. And I went right into the gutter with Jess Franco, one of my great heroes, a great intellect, spoke 7 different languages, beautiful guy, way ahead of his time. I repeat, it is very dangerous to assume an artist's motives, to assume that they are low, base, financial, or simplistic. Let's take the work of Jose Pepe Gonzalez. Look at these fabulous, sensitive drawings of women, particularly the woman on the phone on the right, and equally so, the male and female characters, very sensitively drawn on the left. More sensitive drawings of the same female character on the left. Sensitive renderings of women that Jose Pepe Gonzalez said he drew women the way he wanted to be himself. He wasn't doing these images out of desire. He was doing them out of envy. He wanted to be that which he drew. And here you have images of Jose Pepe Gonzalez exploring those forbidden areas of male cross-dressing as a woman. But what if I told you those sensitive drawings were of this character coming up? What if I had shown you this drawing out of context? Same artist, same character. This comes back to part 1, where I asked the question about Claudia Jennings' character in Gator Bait. Why can't this image coexist with these images? Why can't this character coexist with this character as the same character? And why can't we just accept that we might have all of this within us at the same time? Jeff Jones. I knew Jeff, one of my mentors. When Jeff became Jeffrey Catherine Jones, Jeff confided in me that she drew women not because he in the past wanted to possess them, but because he in the past wanted to be one. More images by Jeff Jones. Often Jeff's women were very body type specific, as you can see here. So, his stuff ran the gamut from idealized beauty to very specific. So, the question starts to become now, is context relevant? I.e., the Vampirella images? Is it relevant at all regards fantasies, imagination, and art? Not if freedom of expression is the priority. In Sade We trust again. Social order at the expense of liberty is hardly a bargain. In order to know virtue, we must first acquaint ourselves with vice. Well, that's just a wicked little quote that I like from the Marquis de Sade and Alphonse Francois de Sade. So let's talk about, women like me, women like many of you who are out there listening to this, women like many of my students who really enjoyed this lecture. Talk about, feminism, liberation, and dumb double standards. Let's start this with Anais Nin, one of the great erotica writers. How wrong is it for a woman to expect a man to build the world she wants rather than to create it herself? And, I might add, to be honest about the world being created, and not to tie it down to a political ideology, but to look deep and create a world that you want to see come about deep within yourself, even if that world is dark and threatening to your ideology. More from Anais Nin. I am an excitable person who only understands life lyrically, musically, in whom feelings are much stronger as reason. I am so thirsty for the marvelous that only the marvelous has power over me. Anything I cannot transform into something marvelous, I let go. Reality doesn't impress me. I only believe in intoxication, in ecstasy, and when ordinary life shackles me, I escape, one way or another. No more walls. Anais Nin. And this from her as well. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. That doesn't just mean courage to deal with issues that come from without, but courage to face the demons within, courage to face those elements of the subconscious that you may not be comfortable with. Let's talk about another woman, besides Beverly Sebastian, who did Gator Bait from the last lecture. Doris Wishman made wonderful exploitation films. This great quote is attributed to her: "When I die, I'll make films in hell." Her films were far more perverse and degrading than those of the men working in the genre of exploitation cinema. Women who tend towards exploitation and erotic fantasy tend to do so fearlessly, and it's been my observation that they tend to do so with just as much degradation and sadism, which is really, quite a welcome thing for me to witness because my work contains a lot of that itself. See also Pauline Réger or Anne Duclos and her great novel, The Story of O, which was turned into a rather mediocre film. But, it's a terrific movie about a woman submissive and from a woman's perspective. And there's really nothing wrong with women having fantasies about being submissive. I do. In Sade We trust. Social order at the expense of liberty is hardly a bargain. I know I'm repeating this. In order to know virtue, we must first acquaint ourselves with vice. Let's talk about other women. Brigitte Bardot. Is this image sexualized? Or is it free and honest? This whole word sexualized, by the way, I just hate it. She was known as the sex kitten, but quite the contrary. She was actually very predatory. I mean, the press might have called her the sex kitten, but in her real life, she was the sexual predator in her relationships. She would walk out on a man and go for another one in the same evening. This is a quote from Simone de Beauvoir, a feminist writer. She goes about barefooted. She turns her nose up at elegant clothes, jewels, girdles, perfumes, makeup, at all artifice. So we've already talked about Beverly Sebastian and Claudia Jennings. But there are many other women besides me, besides Beverly, besides Doris and Claudia and Bardot or whoever who enjoy this stuff. Check out this book, House of Psychotic Women. It's a fantastic book about how exploitation films got this particular woman, the author, through her difficult adolescence. It's a wonderful film, and if this doesn't convince you, and my talk hasn't, then I guess you're not convincible. Art before ideology. Indulge. Enjoy. Let everything throb. If you want to know more about me, barefootjustine.com. I teach at sequentialartistworkshop.org. You can Facebook me at Justine Mara Andersen. And if you want to support my eroticism from a woman's point of view, come to patreon.com/barefootjustine, and there I'll be. Hope you've enjoyed this talk, and maybe I'll see some of you in future talks.